Pull around her hand, make it graceful, not too many angular joints on the knuckles. Now her hair is mostly dark, so knowing that, if you want to get really hardcore into ink talk, then you talk about the light source and how it hits it. I'm also taking into consideration how Doug places his lights. Inker, they say an inker is an artist, a penciler obviously is an artist, and there's a rhyme or reason. I think the basic point here is that her hair is dark, and we want some white light areas to separate the darkness from the shadows on the monster. We can get really fancy and wild with the hair if we want to, as far as tons of lines, some backlighting. I don't have that kind of time. I'm on a deadline, so I will just emphasize its darkness and put a little bit of thin lines in the lighted areas. We'll see how it turns out. Sometimes if you black it all in, you can come in later also. Although this is a little more tedious for me, is to come back in with a white and pull out some highlights that way. I'm really using a thick line out here. It seems that this side of the monster is not as exposed to the light as its left side, which is our right. So this side is a little darker. The light obviously is coming from this side. So if you want to play it up, you can make the contour on his body really thick here and then thinner on the parts facing the light. Now I'm doing the ends of her hair, so I'm going from thin to thick. Might as well talk about feathering here. It's easier to control and maintain consistency in your feathering if you go from thin to thick. And I'll probably come in later and add even more finer stray hairs. Gotta keep in mind that this is supposed to be dark hair. I don't want it to blend into the shadow of the monster's shoulder. So I'll do something with that later where I'll add some lighted hairs to separate that a little bit more. Now, underneath the right arm of the monster, I'm not sure if Doug wanted this all black or he wanted some underlighting to hit it, the same way he did with the legs. I'll just outline the top contour up here, and I'll leave that open. Maybe I'll add some underlighting later. Yes, I do have that power. I turn the page quite a bit because I make my lines in a certain direction. I like to pull lines toward my body. I can't really make the lines any other direction. Now this black part of her shoe up here, I'm going to have to add a little bit of lighting around its edge to separate that from the black area. Some more scales. Now I'm not following Doug's lines perfectly here. The point of inking is to sometimes use the pencil as guidelines, not as the hard end of inking. Some pencilers will pencil razor sharp, and other ones will pencil pretty loose, leaving it open for the inker. Doug and I work pretty well together. I can't read his mind, but I have a pretty good idea of what he likes and doesn't like. But believe me, if I don't follow the lines in some of the texture stuff, he's not going to notice. That's not the focus of the page. Those areas I take advantage of and add more to it to show more texture. So you can go ahead and have fun in certain areas, especially areas of texture. Texture is supposed to be pretty random, so that's what I'm doing. And I'm just kind of going in and just, spotting some blacks and make the blacks a little more sparse as they get closer to the lighted areas to give the illusion of a fade of values. Here we see some lighted wrinkles in the monster's neck in the shadow side. So I'm just outlining those. Some underlighting on the neck. Things will be more clear when this page is finished and I pop in all the blacks. Right now I'm just spotting the blacks in the shadow areas. Just staying loose and warming up my hand for the finer details. I'm doing the contour at the top of his head here, so I'm just actually going to make it a little jaggedy. Like I said, texture is random, generally. And if you mess up, things can always be corrected later with whiteout. I'll do the black side of these plates coming off his back. And you can just fill in the blacks as you go along too. I just save them for last. Because by the time I'm done with the page, I'm just so wiped out that filling blacks after they're outlined is easy and almost kind of relaxing. see, midline of the abdominal area. So one side of it will be black. I'm going to do the claws now on the monster's left hand. And similar to feathering, I'm going to start at the sharpest point, and I'm going to move in and thicken it up as I move in. While I'm at it, I'm just going to do a little bit of a contouring of the fingers. Got some explosions back here. There's a dark wall of a building. Within it, there are some lighted areas, little explosions within it. And then I will feather later to make it look a little more faded. You can get really fancy later, and you can do a spatter effect with a toothbrush, or if you have an airbrush, it's great for doing star effects too. I can show that later. And this explosion up here, you got some chunky bits flying off. They're dark to contrast with the brightness of the explosion. Chunky bits are almost kind of like texture. They're randomized. So I'm just going to lay down some random blacks in the general vicinity of where Doug wanted these little blown bits. You can also use black ink for a splatter effect to help emphasize just a bunch of stuff flying all over the place. I've got pretty much all the big black areas I want. I'm going to move now to the second panel and do the major blacks there. So I'm going to quickly do the contours here with the brush. A little bit of thin to thick right there for the point of his hair. I'll elaborate on that with a smaller brush too. Remember, I'm just laying the brush tip right there. I'm looking there and I'm just, boom, I'm going straight to it. Don't even think about it. And then your lines will come out just fine. Some people, if you need to use a French curve to rule some lines, like for instance, part of her leg, you can use a French curve. You can lay the French curve right along there. Take a pen and swipe that curve, and then you can fill the black with the brush up to that line that you just made. And if you're not confident in using a brush and making your lines, especially longer, smoother lines, go ahead and use what it takes. If it takes a French curve, then do it. It'll look nice and slick. It's a little more tedious for me. Like I said, I'm in a deadline crunch, so I'm going to do my best to do with the brush. Again, just going through the black areas. Big things like close-up shots tend to go a little faster for me than smaller things. For instance, the eyebrow here, any detail with hairs that I want to fade out from it, I can do it later if I want. Some inkers will actually put a piece of paper under their hand to prevent the oils in the skin of your hand from smudging the pencil lines. I don't worry too much about it. As long as you erase thoroughly after you're done inking it, then it should be fine. Just going to contour the bottom of that nose there. And if any of this looks sloppy now, believe me, I'll pull it all together at the end with the detailing, cleaning up, and it'll look just fine. As far as this, a cybernetic eye, I'm not going to freehand brush it because it's a precise technical object. I will use a template later on that. Now, you don't want the lines in the face of a man to be generally not as smooth. My focus is not to make the lines look as graceful as the female figure, and they're always a little more rugged. So like I said, if you need to use a French curve right here to make lines, go ahead. Some guys will actually make the line of each side of the width that they want and then fill it in the middle with black. With me and the brush, I'll just make the desired line thickness right there with that single stroke. Now, I consider this a technical area. Obviously, the ellipses on this chest apparatus that he's got as part of his costume design is a technical thing to ink. We're going to stick with the templates for that later. The bands coming from it, I consider those also a technical thing. I do recommend using a French curve to rule those lines coming from it to make it nice and perfect. For me, they are short enough to where I can do it with a brush and not worry too much. Again, the control comes with just a little bit of practice. Anybody that does it long enough can do it. It's not a really special skill. Inking is just something that you have to practice and work at. You should really try to be a good artist. Draw a lot. Use those drawing skills and that knowledge from art to apply to your inking. It'll really strengthen the piece overall as a whole. I see the X there. I'm going to make most of it black, and I'm going to feather it probably right here to catch a little bit of the light that's coming from the left side. Again, that's another one of the decisions you have to make as an inker. But I'm actually going to make this quite thick here, and then I'm going to feather into that black area. When I'm doing a long steady line, I just start, kind of hold my breath, just go straight to the target. Like I said, don't even think about it. These tendons sticking out from his neck. Now, there's a neckline on his costume. You can see it protrude over the tendon or vein. A cool effect is to actually leave a little edge of light at where the neckline is, and underneath the neckline, to kind of separate. The side of his chin, flatten that side up. Take some time to know how much ink in the brush will give you the lines you want. It just comes with experience and feel. I think we're almost done with the blacks on the second panel here. I'll move on to the third panel. My brush is starting to dry up. I'm going to take a quick break and wash my brush. I basically run it under any sink. Just kind of rub the hairs in between your fingers to get all the ink out, and it's good to go for another round of hardcore inking. So let's get to it. Oh, hey, what's up, Jen?
Oh, nothing much. How are you?
Not too bad, just working on the page.
Good. Is it going good?
It's going okay. It's kind of looking like though. What you got going on today?
Just a bath.
Just a bath? All day?
Well, I take a couple of them, you know, so.
What do you, Miss High Maintenance Prissy Girl or something? You're gonna pay that water bill, right? And we are back. I'm gonna start doing in the blacks of the third panel. So, start with these little bony protrusions from the monster's back. Again, you don't have to be very exact. It's just a time waster to be exact anyway. All these black areas, they're going to be refined later in the detailing. We're getting to the shoulder here, and it's randomized, and you want to just randomly do some black spots. Just load up the brush with a lot of ink. And I blackened in part of the shoulder here. And I'm going to just feather this out towards the light. Just 3 little strokes there. That'll indicate the indentation on the top of the shoulder that a lot of muscular people have, where you can see where it connects. The arm bone and the collarbone connect. So that should be good. You know, these neck veins and tendons are also quite random, as long as they're going in the general direction that the penciler wanted to. Heavy shadow right above the eye. Maybe the brow juts out a bit, so it casts a shadow underneath the eye, so we're going to thicken that up too. We want to convey the more frightening, dark, ominous look to the eyes. You can see his tongue here. Right now I'm thinking whether I want to separate the bottom of the tongue with a halo. That doesn't look too bad. A little bit of feathering off the blacks will give the illusion that the tongue is receding in its form into the blacks anyway. So I think it's fine. We'll leave it at that. We don't need to separate the tongue anymore. A random skin texture blacks here. Use some of the blacks on his back now and on his left arm. Sometimes, you know, like little happy accidents, you know, where it accidentally leaves a little bit of white spots where you didn't fill in very efficiently the entire solid black area, and you see a little bit of white areas that you missed. It's almost like some of the bumps on his skin in the black is catching some light. So that I don't really worry about too much, especially on really textured surfaces, to miss some white areas of the paper. I could leave a little bit of speckles of white from the paper, and it would almost seem like it's adding to the texture. It's a, you know, quick little trick. Basically, you're haphazardly just swishing the brush around in the black area like this. You see some white areas, I touch them up a bit, break them up a bit if they're too long of a line, and they just look like they're catching the light, accentuating little tiny bumps within the black. These little protrusions are casting a shadow back here. Back to the thin to thick lines of the claws. Notice that the underside of each finger is considerably thicker than the top line of each finger. That's just the basic rule that if light comes from above, then parts are darker as you get lower because the light is not hitting it. Right there I'm doing some contouring. Even though I generally don't do contouring yet, I'll do some just because I'm there and the brush is in my hand. I'm going to finish her left leg and foot, which is the blackened one here that goes behind her right leg. I'm going to finish the foot on the other side, which doesn't seem to be drawn in. Again, I'm going to use the thin to thick into the dark parts of her hair. This might be better suited for the smaller 0 or aught brush, but I'll do a few here. Energy bolt surrounding the superhero's hands. A little bit of feathering coming off certain angles of the boat, which we will do later. I'm just going to lay that in. We can do some fancy stuff later with the bolt itself. Like I said, right now I'm just laying in the basic blacks. And this is another area where you can just kind of add a little more, kind of go nuts. Random debris, rocks coming up from the ground, concrete that the monster's right hand is smashing into. And I'm using quick, thin, broken lines. Sometimes in between broken lines, I'll do like a little dot. It kind of just adds to the texture effect, the surface. I mean, obviously it's not smooth. Some more spotted blacks here. I'm just going to dab it in the background. It's like some blacks on the horizon of the ground, if you will. I'm going to add some blacks in there. We got the lower contour of the monster's arm right there. Lay it in thick. Do some contouring here. Some broken lines, like I said, texture. Not too clean. Some thick, some thin, some dots. I'm going to thicken it up just a bit, just for the simple reason that this arm is farther away from you, and I've already established the thickness of that arm. This is closer to you. I'm going to make the lines just a little bit thicker, just to enhance the effect that one arm is closer to you. Duck in the foreground. I believe Doug wanted this to be a real duck. A cartoony looking, but real duck, as opposed to a toy duck. He didn't do a lot of texturing in there. I'll add a little more feather type texture. Right here I'm doing some feathering right off the duck's contour on his tail. Even though Doug did not draw it, kind of adds to a little bit of a texture effect on the duck if my goal is to make him a real duck. Actually, I'm going to throw a little bit of feathering off the edge of his head here too. Alright, I'm going to begin contouring. I'm still sticking with the number 1. The brush is still holding up quite well. And I'm just going to do the major outlines now. And then from there, we'll just work into the smaller and smaller details. So let's get right to it. I'm going to start with the monster. I'm going to outline underside of his arm. Already I noticed that the line here is too smooth. So I'm going to add a little bit of dashed texture effect along the edge of the contour there to add to the scaly effect. Perhaps I should thicken up the underside just a bit more so it's not too close in width as the top line over here on his arm. Then on her very short, promiscuous looking shorts here, it seems to have rolled up right here. So this little folded roll, I'm going to outline the top, thinner line, bottom a little bit thicker. Give a little bit of a weight and thickness to that roll. I'm gonna add a little bit more black to that side. For dramatic effect, a little bit of smoke back here. I'm gonna just go in with the brush and do it. Not gonna make it nice and puffy, cartoony smooth. Gonna add a lot of peaks and valleys. Keeping it relatively thin. It's not a weighty object, smoke. It's just gas. I'm gonna waver the brush a bit to make the lines a little more interesting. It'll get quite boring if you use the same line width all the way around an object, although that could be part of your style. That'll do. The rest of the monster's crotch and legs here. Thicken that up just a bit more. That's it. Not too much thicker than the top, but enough of a difference. I'm gonna pop in a couple more blacks up here. At this stage, like I said, my goal is just to get the basic forms down. Now that I have the blacks, I'm doing the contours and maybe some basic inner details, like maybe clothing separation. It's also a clever technique if you're on a deadline. As much as I hate to say it, you're forced sometimes to take shortcuts and leave stuff out. By working this way, you're actually prioritize things first. Blacks and then contours, basic contours and basic details of the face, the outline of the eyes. You know, if you start doing just texture and detail stuff right away and you're in a time pinch and you have to hand it in, all you got is just fancy texture down. You don't have any basic drawing done. As long as the basics drawing is done, then the colors can sometimes add and help you make the piece look more finished. I'm going to contour her right hand. First finish up the monster's arm here. Normally for something this small, I'd probably switch to a 0 size. You know, if you're not confident enough to do it with a bigger brush, switch to a smaller one, or even a pen. It's what you're comfortable with. But since this brush is already in my hand, really small lines, unless you're really good with the brush, you're better off using a pen for really small, tiny detail stuff. For really thick contours and big blacks, obviously, brush is the way to go in my opinion. Now I'm going to do some more contouring on the woman, making sure that the lines are nice and neat, very clean, very delicate and smooth. In my opinion, one of the most important areas for inking a woman, as funny as it sounds, is the bust. You don't want to ink the chest in a way that it's lopsided, it looks very weird, unnatural. You don't want to have any shaky lines, you just want the illusion of smooth, full, and roundness to them. As sick as that sounds. So I'm making sure I'm going around very carefully. It's a cute little tube top, wouldn't you say? Not too big on the stripes though. That's a fashion faux pas, Doug. I'm already getting pretty thin with some of these lines coming off on the hair right now at this point. I'm going to do the other side here, making sure I leave a lighted edge to separate it from the monster's shoulder. I don't want the light edge to be too thick, just want a little hint of it. You know, the hair is not a real weighty presence, so I don't want to thicken up on the highlighted edge too much. Just make it thin and wispy. Just a suggestion is all you need. Now I'm going to do the neck. Looks good. Top of her shorts. I don't want to do a solid line all the way across because there's an overlapping flap here, so I'm going to raise the line a bit and continue on. Keep in mind the forms of the objects as you ink. You're not just following lines here, folks. It looks like underneath her left armpit here is casting a tiny little black shadow on part of the monster's right thumb. I'm going to connect this elbow up. I'm making sure that the lines connect pretty seamlessly. You want to make connections flow smoothly into each other as if it was one fluid line that you executed. I'm going to save the smaller brush for the superhero in the back. Are we done? No, I'll do some more teeth up here. Slightly thicken up one side that's away from the light. Now when you get this small in detail, it's really not that important, but I will do it just to drive home the point that you should be consistent in your light source. Believe me, all the classic rules that you hear about when you're trying to learn about inking, once you become a pro, you can throw those rules out the window and make up your own. I stick to them where I can, and I'm going to do a couple more muscle areas in here. Couple more blacks. 2 grade 8 out of the black area, some black spots for skin texture on the left arm here. Moving down to the second panel, close-up shot of the hero's head. I'm going to start doing some feathering into the top portion of his head. The feathering here is pretty consistent and mechanical looking. It's not random. Even though hair is random, more of a stylistic thing on whether you want to make a more random feathering pattern that overlap each other, or if you want it a little bit more consistent and mechanical. You can do a little bit of both actually. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw in some stray lines. These are quick. Said don't think about it too much. I'm going to start off really thin. Hey, you want to get really fancy, you can go back in with the white and do some more highlighted hairs. Now I'm going to brush in some more forehead lines. I don't want them as smooth as the female lines, the lines that go on her body. Yet I don't want it as rugged as the texture of the monster's skin. So I guess the best way is just to kind of keep it in between. Now my lines, I often like to use what I call the double-ended taper. And what it is I start thin, I get thick in the middle, and I end thin. So it gets fat only right in the middle. And I will do the hatching and the cross hatching later to add even more depth and form to the lines. Like I said, right now it's just getting the basic drawing done. Because all the little lines, the hatching and cross hatching, that's extra, that's like bonus and icing on the cake. The drawing is basically done once you get your basic lines down. As I mentioned earlier, if you're in a deadline crunch and you get just the basic lines down, if you have any time left over, then you can add in the fancy stuff. But if you don't add the fancy stuff, it's not going to harm the basic drawing, which is already done. I'm doing some eyelashes here. I'm not going to give our male hero any more eyelashes on the bottom lid than Doug had indicated. You know, he likes putting eyelashes on a male and he still is able to make it look masculine. People tend to think eyelashes on a male will feminize the face. Not true. As long as you keep it fairly bare bones and don't add too much. Don't embellish that any more than what is there. So I'm just going to be done with that.